welcome to Gathering Place, the story of the Agora. I'm Catherine McIntyre, I'm the Archivist here at the City Discovery Centre at Bradwell Abbey, and I'm going to be talking a bit about the planning and the construction of the Agora in the 1970s. But first, let me give you a bit of context and history. Wolverton Works was the first purpose-built railway town in the country, which means that all of the buildings were designed and built for the railway workers and their families. A locomotive works was founded at Wolverton in 1838, and it was chosen as a place halfway on the route between London and Birmingham where locomotives could be repaired and maintained. The locomotive works later built locomotives, and in 1860 it became Wolverton Carriage and Wagon Works, or Wolverton Works for short. The Agora is situated between Church Street and Buckingham Street at the northern end of Market Square. It lies over the southern end of Radcliffe Street, which once connected Market Square to Stratford Road. The core of Wolverton's housing and a lot of the buildings around the centre are made of Victorian red brick. Church Street was built around 1860, and the last railway company houses to be built on Buckingham Street was around 1878. When the new town of Milton Keynes was designated in 1967, the area included Wolverton. And Milton Keynes Development Corporation, who were the organisation tasked with designing and building the new city, were keen to incorporate the existing settlements in the designated area into the new town by keeping as much character as possible. However, they also wanted to improve the towns and villages and make sure they could cope with an increased population. The local government authority at the time was Wolverton Urban District Council, and they were keen to have Wolverton play an important part in the new city. They were especially keen for Wolverton Town Centre to be redeveloped, and there was much debate between the council and the corporation about how they would go about this. Both organisations concluded that in both planning and commercial terms, there was going to be no easy solution to this revitalisation. In its early proposals, the corporation stated that existing shopping facilities should be developed and improved. They wanted efficient and imaginative use of current facilities to provide high quality and rich diversity. And as we can see, the corporation would go on to develop new local shopping buildings at Bletchley with the Brunel Centre, Stony Stratford with Coffridge Close, and Wolverton with the Agora. The plan for Milton Keynes, which is often referred to as the master plan for the city, states that Wolverton will require the development of new premises for retail and allied uses. Two potential locations are put forward, the vicinity of Market Square and the western end of town. Other reports and surveys carried out by the corporation culminate in an assessment of the shopping in Wolverton that concludes that it's just too spread out. One report in particular highlights the following. There's a lack of concentration of shops, reducing their overall attraction and efficiency. The shopping streets are dreary and depressing. They said Stratford Road faced a blank wall of the works. Church Street was featureless. It said that Radcliffe Street was narrow and sloping with no frontages. There was no grouping of trades, which goes back to that bit about efficiency. It said that there was a poor state of repair for some of the smaller shops, which were mainly concentrated at the eastern end of Church Street and were ripe for redevelopment. It said that 88% of the shops had less than 500 square foot of floor space, making interiors cramped. Proposals put forward by the corporation in 1971 stated that Wolverton should not perform a local or a district centre role due to it being badly located in relation to its catchment area. It also said that the buildings on Church Street, from the Science and Art Institute at the eastern end to Radcliffe Street, should be demolished, and that the south side of Church Street should be redeveloped for housing, and they suggested 3 or 4 storey blocks of flats. The square should become a local shopping centre, and that the market should remain where it was and extend into Glyn Square. After discussions on the proposals with the District Council, an agreement was finally reached in 1973, and I think finally is an understatement, and the proposals were put forward to the Department of the Environment in 1974. The proposals had done away with any residential redevelopment and asked for permission for provision of shopping facilities, which would be the Glyn Square development, a multi-use building incorporating shops, offices, stall market, cafe, fully licensed bar with recreation and community uses, which would be the Agora, public open space, landscaping and car parking. These new proposals were inspired by the Agora in Dronten in the Netherlands, which had opened in 1969. Designed by Frank van Klingeren, the community centre was all-purpose, open-planned, and deliberately left partly unfinished and undesigned to incorporate potential future uses. Council and corporation staff visited in the early 1970s. The proposals were for a new social and commercial centre for Wolverton, with a 14,000 square foot market hall with space for 70 stalls and provision for other uses such as netball, badminton, football, brass band shows, concerts, exhibitions, public meetings. There would be 20 shop units surrounding the hall, and the first floor would contain office accommodation for private firms and local voluntary and community organisations. The reorganisation of local government in that same year, 1974, saw Wolverton Urban District Council merged with other local councils to form the Borough of Milton Keynes. Now, the Borough of Milton Keynes confirmed that they would lease part of the Agora, manage the central space, and pay revenue costs. And these were all important factors in the overall viability of the project. With government approval for the project, the design team was formed from the North Milton Keynes Directorate of the Corporation, headed by Nigel Lane. Architect Wayland Tunley and assistant architect Trevor Davison, along with other professionals, worked on the designs. And they initially came up with a round Colosseum-type building. However, this proved too difficult to support the roof of and would have been too expensive. So the square design, turned 45 degrees to provide access to the service points, was finalised. They chose red brick for the material so that the building would be in keeping with its surroundings. The design was approved by the board of the corporation in 1975, and the following year they approved a budget for the Wolverton Centre development of £1,472,150. Meanwhile, attempts by the corporation to purchase the Science and Art Institute at the eastern end of Church Street had begun in 1969. By that time, the building had become derelict and was considered dangerous, and the corporation were looking to purchase it with a view to demolition. However, in June 1969, a prospective purchaser had put in a planning application to Buckinghamshire County Council, and the owners of the Science and Art Institute, the Radcliffe Trust, were awaiting an outcome on this planning application before deciding who to sell to. The planning application was for a supermarket, shops and office accommodation, which was not too dissimilar to what the corporation would eventually do with the site. The planning application was refused, but the prospective purchaser put in an appeal. Now, Ray Bell Chambers, who was on the board of the corporation, but was also a local man, he worked at Wolverton Works and he was a local councillor, he urged the corporation to do something about the building because he said that the building was having a depressive effect on the town. The appeal was turned down and the corporation could finally move forward with purchasing the Science and Art Institute. But it took until 1976 for the acquisition to be approved, and it cost the corporation £29,500. So obviously the site for the Agora had existing buildings on it that would need to be demolished, and this was started on the 22nd of September 1975. Earlier in that month, a condition report carried out by the corporation on buildings 33/35, 49 and 51 Church Street and 38 Buckingham Street said that the buildings were mainly structurally sound, but the major problem was damp, which was being caused by water ingress from leaking windows and leaky gutters and things like that. So the buildings were structurally sound, they just needed to be demolished to make way for the new building. And the Co-op Menswear, which was at 33/35 Church Street, moved to the square, and Southern Gas, which was at 38 Buckingham Street, moved to further along Church Street, and I think it eventually took a unit in the Agora. Before demolition, Radcliffe Street had been closed to traffic, which exacerbated the existing traffic problems in Wolverton. Car parking was a huge issue for the residents, as it still seems to be, but the closure of Radcliffe Street meant that the major route to amenities in Market Square had been diverted to the more residential Cambridge and Aylesbury streets, which the local residents felt was dangerous for children and the elderly who were walking along those streets and experiencing an increased traffic flow. So with the construction of the Agora already causing problems for the local residents, the local newspaper, the Milton Keynes Express, nicknamed it the Agro. However, it wasn't just the Agora contributing to the problems. The car park at Wolverton Works was too small, which was causing British Rail workers to park in the streets. And local councillor Frank Atta said that the problems were also caused by the Victorian right-angled design of the streets, which he said was made for horses and carts and not cars. The contract to construct the Agora was given to the Northampton subsidiary of David Charles Construction, and at the end of 1976, the roof was supposed to be raised into place. However, it was delayed after the subcontractors pulled all their workers and equipment off-site in a precautionary measure after the Nottingham subsidiary of David Charles had been closed down. So they pulled off all their men and workers just in case they started doing work that they were not going to get paid for if the Northampton subsidiary had closed down. So after a short delay, the contract for construction was transferred to C. Bryant & Son, and the roof was lifted to place on the 9th of December 1976. It measured 142 foot square, weighed over 72 tonnes, and was one of the largest space frames to be used in the country. It took 4 cranes 5 hours to lift the roof 26 feet from the ground to its place onto the top of the structure. Originally, the roof was going to be made of a lightweight aluminium material, which would have given the central space a much lighter space. However, after the Summerland disaster on the Isle of Man in 1973, where over 50 people died in a fire made worse by the same material that was going to be used in the Agora roof, meant that it was changed to steel, and that central space is a little bit more darker than it probably would have been. In 1977, the Borough of Milton Keynes dealt the blow that they would be pulling out of leasing any space in the Agora, of managing the central space, and of paying any revenue costs. So for them, the original staffing projections were no longer feasible, and the existing budget for recreational facilities had already been cut too far to take on anything new. This left the corporation almost high and dry, especially when £35,000 worth of additional features had been included in the design for the area specific to the borough's management. This is how roller skating came to dominate the Agora landscape. After the borough's withdrawal, the corporation stated that, to be a success from a community point of view, the management of the Agora would need to be carried out constructively and with imagination. Alan Eagles of the Whispering Wheels Club in Wolverhampton was approached to manage the central space, and his outfit was visited by 2 of the board members, including Ray Belchambers, who were reluctant at the idea of roller skating. But they agreed that his business was impressive and that it would be a good fit for the management of the bar, the cafe and the market hall. So Mr. Eagles was brought in and roller skating took off, especially amongst the young people of the surrounding area. In a survey carried out in 1980, 83% of skaters were aged between 11 and 20. And I was particularly interested in how much local use it was getting and how much use it was getting from established residents. So in that same survey, 19% of skaters, so almost a fifth, lived in Wolverton. And 37%, so almost 2/5, had lived in Milton Keynes for over 10 years. So it got a lot of use from the local residents and those who had been living in Milton Keynes for a while. Ray Belchambers, again, he thought that the Agora was a fine building and that it should be shown off. He urged the corporation to have an official opening, but I couldn't find any evidence of whether there was one or not. It seemed to trickle open, with some of the offices being let first, shops opening as and when they were let. A corporation press release in April 1979 said that it would open soon. The roller skating started up not long after that, and the market hall moved to the central space in July. I found it difficult to uncover much reaction. Apparently the market traders were happy, with the local newspaper reporting that everyone agreed it was a great success, and business carried on briskly long after the usual clearing away time. After months of uncertainty, the stallholders themselves announced that they were delighted with the move. However, there was also a letter from a local reader who highlighted the hardship for the elderly of having the rent and rates office of the council on the first floor. So it was difficult for them to get up. It seems as early as 1980, the corporation were worried about the Agora. A paper presented to the Executive Management Committee in that same year summarised the history of its development and the current situation. Tenant lets were satisfactory, but retail trading was a significant concern. 2 of the larger shop units had not yet been let, and of those that were, turnover was significantly below estimates. The contributing factors were identified as the drawn-out opening, the lack of a major shop unit until the co-op opened, the unfinished appearance, its association with roller skating, and the fact that it was not performing a local or a district centre role. Also, I can't help feeling one of the major problems was that the delays to the construction and also the planning meant that the Agora was opening at the same time as the central Milton Keynes shopping building, which meant that shops and shoppers were drawn to central Milton Keynes instead. During the 1980s, the corporation was preparing for its closure, which meant transferring assets to the council, the Commission for the New Towns, charitable trusts, and private hands where appropriate. In 1988, it sold the Agora to Able Third Limited, and so began a long line of private ownership. Agora, or Agora as it's supposed to be pronounced, means gathering place or assembly in ancient Greek, and it was a place where local citizens would gather to hear rulings from their leaders. It was later a marketplace and attracted artisans. So the corporation's initial big visions for the Agora as a social and community hub, as well as a place for commerce, were sadly never fully realised.